You're listening to The Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the latest and greatest in sports as only he can. Follow him on Twitter at RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, sports fans! Welcome to another edition of the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and there's a lot to get to today. 3 football stories, 2 basketball stories, 1 hockey story, and the first ever interview in the history of the Jacob Valk Show. This will be the answer to a trivia question at some point in time. At the end of the show, you will hear a phone call interview that I did with Joe Zagorski, the author of America's Trailblazing Middle Linebacker, the story of NFL Hall of Famer Willie Lanier. So you're definitely going to want to stick around for that. It was a lot of fun talking to him. But I have to start with another football story. The trade rumors surrounding Darius Slay. Now this comes from Adam Schefter. He said that multiple teams have spoken with the Lions about trades involving Slay. This isn't the first time that we've heard his name mentioned in trade rumors. His name was bandied about at the deadline last year, but we're seeing his name pop up again. And look, Slay did not have a great year last year. According to Pro Football Focus, his overall grade was 56.4. That's the worst grade he's ever gotten in the NFL, with the exception of his rookie year. But this guy, for the past 5 seasons, has been one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. In 2017, he had 8 interceptions. If you were to make a list of the best cornerbacks in the NFL, would Slay be in the top 10? Probably not after the year he had, but he'd probably be top 15, maybe top 20. You can do a lot worse than trading for Darius Slay. I know that the Eagles have been in the market for cornerback help since they couldn't swing a trade for Jalen Ramsey. The Broncos could lose Chris Harris. Slay would be a great replacement for him. The Jets would make sense for him, although I think they can go after Byron Jones. The Cowboys could make sense if they lose out on Jones. There are a bunch of different options for Slay. It's also possible that the Lions give him the extension that he deserves. You know, the thing with giving Slay an extension is he's 29 years old. He already showed signs of dropping off last year. Now, he got hurt in a few games. He missed 3 whole games and didn't play a lot in the Week 7 game against the Vikings. You've got to think that the injuries that he sustained last year were affecting him all throughout the year. Or it's just possible that he lost part of what made him great just due to the fact that he got older. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Slay. I'm not a fan of what's happening in Detroit. I think Matt Patricia's a clueless head coach. I don't think Bob Quinn has done a good job as GM. There are even rumors that they could just completely blow the whole thing up and get rid of Matthew Stafford. I think that would be a terrible decision. It is not Matthew Stafford's fault that the Lions are garbage. It is the fact that he has never had a good system around him. Look, I understand that he got hurt last year, but for goodness sake, he's still one of the 10 or 15 best quarterbacks in the NFL. You can do a lot worse than having Matthew Stafford as your quarterback. What's the most reliable Ford in Detroit? A Stafford. I got that from Gridiron Heights from Bleacher Report. I did not come up with that on my own. I'm not that clever. The bottom line is, I don't necessarily mind the Lions trading Darius Slay if they really think that last year was a harbinger of what's to come. Then, yeah, trade him for a third rounder. I don't mind that at all. I'd be surprised if you got more than that for him. Maybe a day 3 pick along with it, but I'd be surprised if you got a second. But if you really think that he could turn it around, then pay him. Because for 5 of the last 6 years, Slay has been one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. Also, please, Bob Quinn, don't trade Matthew Stafford. Don't cut Matthew Stafford. Don't do anything with Matthew Stafford. Don't be stupid. Moving over now to the Cardinals extending DJ Humphries. They locked him up for 3 more years at $45 million, and I understand why. Offensive line continuity is one of the most underrated things in the NFL. Chemistry among offensive linemen is extremely important. If you have a good offensive lineman who's been with the team for a long time, and that's what Humphries is, but you want to replace him with a great offensive lineman, it's not going to work. He's got to get the cadences down. He's got to learn the snap count. He's got to learn, a bunch of things. You can't just pluck the 5 best offensive linemen in the NFL, put them on one team, and expect them to immediately coalesce. It's not going to work. Houston Texans, perfect example of that. They traded for Laramie Tunsil. The offensive line was still pretty bad. The Cardinals last year had a really good offensive line. Humphries was a big part of that. Lord knows they need a good offensive line with Kyler Murray there. That's not a knock on Murray. I like Murray. I think Murray's going to be a very good quarterback in this league for a long time. Maybe even a great quarterback. But he's a mobile quarterback. Those guys need great offensive lines. Is it an overpay for Humphries? A little bit. He's not the 3rd best left tackle in football. And he's being paid like he is. He's only behind Taylor Lewan and Nick Solder. But they had to keep him around because, like I said, offensive line continuity is extremely important. I don't mind the deal for the Cardinals at all. In fact, I actually like it a lot. The final football news story that I want to get to concerns the Cleveland Browns cleaning house. They cut TJ Carey, Demetrius Harris, Eric Kush, and Adarius Taylor. All 4 of those guys, with the exception of Demetrius Harris, stink. TJ Carey was brought in on a big free agent deal by John Dorsey. 2 years ago, he had a good year, but last year, he had a terrible year. Really, really bad in coverage, not a good tackler. Just didn't work. Eric Kush was a terrible offensive lineman for Cleveland last year. Thank God they got rid of him. The issue with the Browns last year, if you watched them, and I watched them a lot, was their offensive line. It wasn't Baker Mayfield. Alright, Mayfield's a really, really good quarterback in this league. He had a sophomore slump. He'll learn from it. I am still a big believer in Baker Mayfield. But he had a garbage offensive line. Besides Joel Bitonio and J.C. Treader, everyone on that O-line was terrible. You know it's bad when you're praying for Greg Robinson to come back from injury. No one is going to mistake Greg Robinson for Big Bob Brown. The play calling didn't help either. Freddie Kitchens is a terrible head coach. I think he'll do fine with the Giants as a positional coach. But that's not the issue. The issue is Eric Kush stinks. Good for the Browns for getting rid of him. Adarius Taylor barely played on defense. He was more of a special teams guy. He wasn't good there. I have no problem with the Browns getting rid of him. The thing that I don't like is Demetrius Harris getting cut. I like Demetrius Harris. He played really well when Njoku was out. Harris is actually one of the better backup tight ends in football. He's a goal line threat. He actually only had one less touchdown than Odell Beckham last year. Beckham only had 4 touchdowns. Harris had 3. The Browns better keep Ricky Seals-Jones around. Because God forbid Njoku gets hurt again, you're going to miss Demetrius Harris. But I really can't get upset that they cut him if they really think that Seals-Jones is better than Harris, which you can make the argument that he is. I understand saving the money. It's going to be very interesting to see what Cleveland does to reinforce Mayfield, Chubb, Landry, and Beckham. Speaking of Cleveland, but not the Browns, their basketball team, I really, really want to talk about the rumors surrounding John Beilein. And this broke Sunday. I didn't talk about it because there was a lot to get to, and I knew that I'd be able to get to it today. It's painfully obvious that the situation in Cleveland is untenable. This really started at the draft, to tell you the truth. When Beilein, even though he already had Colin Sexton, took Darius Garland. He thought they could play together, and look, they're both going to be really good players in this league for a long time, but the Cavs would have been so much better off if they had just taken Cam Reddish. Reddish would have been perfect for the Cavs. You've got Love, Sexton, Clarkson, and Reddish. That's the makings of a solid young core right there. Instead, you take another ball-dominant guard in Garland. Of course it's not going to work. Now, Sexton has had a really good year this year, but Garland hasn't. Garland is only averaging 12 points a game. 2 rebounds, 4 assists. He's better than that. I'm not knocking Garland, but it just shows that Beilein did not think this through. Look, it was a good decision to hire him if you were the Cavs. He had been very successful at Michigan, and he succeeded wherever he's been. He's never been an assistant coach. Never. He started his coaching career as a head coach. One of the few to do it. He started out at a high school, Newfane High School in Newfane, New York. And then he worked his way through the New York circuit, ended up in Richmond, West Virginia, Michigan, and then the Cavs. So there was no reason to think that this couldn't have worked. Yeah, the list of college coaches to make the jump to the NBA, with the exception of Brad Stevens, is a bad one. Billy Donovan has underachieved in Oklahoma City in the past. Fred Hoiberg was a terrible head coach for the Bulls. Reggie Theus was a terrible coach for the Kings. Mike Montgomery was terrible for the Warriors. Leonard Hamilton only had 1 year with the Wizards, and he only finished with 19 wins. Do I need to keep going? Lon Kruger, Tim Floyd, Rick Pitino, John Calipari. It's a terrible list. Maybe it's just that the games are too different. Just because you're a great recruiter doesn't mean that you're going to be a great NBA head coach. And look, this has been in the works for a while. The thugs and slugs controversy, which I believe that Beeline meant to call them slugs. You know, that... I don't want to say that seems like an innocent slip of the tongue, but I highly doubt that he went into that meeting thinking that he wanted to call them thugs. He was already in danger of losing the locker room. The last thing you want to do is say something with a racist connotation like that. I'd be stunned if he was coaching the Cavs next year. He may not even finish out this year. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he resigned, or if the Cavs worked out some sort of an agreement with him in the coming days. It's not a good situation in Cleveland. The one thing that you can kind of look to for optimism is that Andre Drummond is looking really good in Cleveland so far. Colin Sexton looks like he's going to be a great player in this league for a long time. And other than that, they've got some good pieces. Darius Garland. I'd even be surprised if Garland finished out his rookie contract with the Cavs. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he was traded to get someone who's a better fit alongside Sexton. Kevin Love may be traded, so you gotta think that return will help the Cavs. It's not a good situation in Cleveland. I feel really sorry for you, Cavs fans. The season started out with so much promise, and it's just gone belly up ever since. I wish I could say something to make you happy, but I really, really can't. However, I can make Houston Rockets fans happy. Very active on the buyout market, bringing in Jeff Green and, in all likelihood, DeMare Carroll. Can you say small ball? Holy moly. They could have added a true center. I don't know who that guy would have been, but they could have done it. Instead, they went out and signed someone who's very familiar with small ball in DeMare Carroll. He played a lot of small ball 4 for the Nets. And Jeff Green, who the past 4 seasons has played a lot of small ball. Played small ball for the Magic, the Cavs, the Wizards, and the Jazz. I like the fit for them in Houston. They're both still really good players. Jeff Green still showed that he has something left. Yeah, he's a little bit infuriating. He's a little streaky, but for the most part, you can rely on him to fill his role really well. DeMare Carroll was a terrible fit in San Antonio. It should have worked. That signing made a ton of sense for the Spurs. And I think everyone thought that was going to work out. But he was never in their rotation consistently, even though he signed a 3-year, $21 million contract with them. It's a rare miss by the Spurs. I guess they're allowed at least one, since they've been the model of consistency for so long in this league. But yeah, it's not a good look that he never worked out for the Spurs. But ultimately, I like what the Rockets are doing. Do they need a true center to match up with guys like Anthony Davis and Nikola Jokic? Yes, that will hurt them in the playoffs, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if they went on a big playoff run. It just depends on who they're facing when they get there. The last story that I want to get to before the interview is the Canucks trading for Tyler Toffoli. And you remember when I said that he could be traded yesterday? Holy moly! Did I hit the nail on the head? I'm telling you, I speak things into existence on this show. This is a fantastic trade for Vancouver. There's no other way to slice it. Tim Schaller was a terrible fit there. He had one semi-decent season in Boston. Then he signed a big contract with Vancouver. And it never worked. Tyler Madden, from what I've gathered, is a guy with a ton of potential. He comes from a good hockey family. He's John Madden's son, former New Jersey Devil. I remember seeing him play. I liked him. Look, the Kings got a decent return, but the Canucks easily win this trade. They didn't give up a first-round pick. Toffoli was probably the best rental skater available. Maybe with the exception of Chris Kreider. And even then, I don't know if Kreider's better than Toffoli. It's really, really close. This sets the Canucks up really well in the Western Conference. They're making a legitimate run at the Stanley Cup. I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with in the playoffs. Adding him to a team with Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, Bo Horvat, Brock Besser, Quinn Hughes, Tanner Pearson, and Jake Virtanen is scary. And Jacob Markstrom's a good goalie. He's not great, but he's good. They also have a good coach in Travis Green, former Islander, who every year he's been there, the Canucks have gotten better. He's one of the best coaches in the NHL. There is no question in my mind that he is one of the 10 best coaches in this league. Beware the Canucks in the playoffs. They're going to be a tough out for any team that faces them. I'd be remiss, though, if I didn't talk about what this means for the Islanders. It's upsetting that the Islanders couldn't get him. Lord knows they need him. They've only scored 1 goal in their past 3 games. They are extremely, and I mean extremely tough to watch right now. I was watching them against the Coyotes yesterday. I wanted to pull my own eyes out. Having said that, there's still a couple forwards that Lamoriello can go after. They don't need to add another defenseman. Green played well yesterday, and the defense looked really good. I know it's just 1 game, but focus on adding a forward right now. They're not going to get Kreider. There's no way that the Rangers will trade him to the Islanders. J.G. Pageau is still available. Ilya Kovalchuk is still available. Kyle Palmieri would be a fantastic fit for the Islanders. Other than that, I'm looking at TSN's trade bait list right now, and those are the only forwards on that list that I want. Lamoriello has to get at least one of them. If not, this team is going to be humiliated in the playoffs. Assuming they even get there. It's a real chance that they fall out of the playoffs altogether. Alright, here we go. Joe Zagorski interview coming up right now. You're listening to the Jacob Valk Show. I am Jacob Valk, and I'm fortunate enough to be joined now. I'm nervous to be talking to Joe Zagorski, the author of America's Trailblazing Middle Linebacker, the story of NFL Hall of Famer Willie Lanier. Joe, I'm starstruck. How are you, buddy?
Well, no need to be starstruck, Jacob. I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing good. You're the first interview I've ever done for the Jacob Valk Show.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, exactly.
Holy cow. Hey, I'm honored.
Well, I'm excited to have you. I'm just going to jump right into it. Why did you choose to write about Willie Lanier?
Well, I was on my way. This is a long story, but I'll try to make it as brief as possible. I was on my way up to Canton, Ohio, to the Pro Football Hall of Fame to do research on another subject, and a friend of mine who works at NFL Films told me that somebody at Roman and Littlefield, Kristen Karniski, was interested in possibly seeing what I might have in mind for a book for Roman and Littlefield. And I asked her, I talked to her, and she said that she was looking for a sports book with a social slant to it. And I thought about it for a few days, and I came up with the idea, my specialty is mostly writing about pro football during the 1970s, and I knew that there was a guy that never had a book written about him, but he was the first African-American middle linebacker in pro football history, and that was Willie Lanier. And I thought, why don't I try to write a biography of Willie? I had heard so many great things about him, and of course I saw him play as a youngster, because I'm old now. So I decided to pitch the idea to Roman and Littlefield. How about a biography of a guy that never had a book written about him before, Willie Lanier? He's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He's won a Super Bowl. He's got so many great things, that he's done in his life. And Roman and Littlefield loved the idea, and so I decided to roll with it.
That's really crazy that you're the first guy to write a book about Willie Lanier. Like you said, Pro Football Hall of Famer, probably the best linebacker of the 70s. How did it take so long for someone to write a book about this guy?
That is an incredibly important question, because we seem to, focus on a lot of, in society, we focus a lot on people that make a whole lot of headlines, preferably in like New York and Los Angeles, major media markets. He played his entire career in Kansas City, Missouri. So he doesn't get a lot of press over the years. And I really don't know why people didn't pay more attention to him, other than the fact that his best years and the team's best years that he played for, the Chiefs, were early on in his career. But from like 72 on, the Chiefs were a poor team. They were not a very good team. And so a lot of people ignored what was happening in Kansas City. And I think that has a lot to say about why nobody really wrote a book of him after that. So,
all right. Well, he grew up in a small town in Southern Virginia called Clover. Was he ever the subject of racism, and how did it affect his life and career, if he was?
Well, he didn't spend much time in Clover. He was born there, but he spent most of his time in Richmond. I don't think, you're talking about the 60s. I don't think that there are very few African Americans who didn't experience some sort of racism, at least maybe in how would you say, a different type of way. I'm sure that Willie probably didn't, get injured physically by it, but it could have been, spoken words or things like that. I don't think there were very many African Americans in the 60s who didn't experience at least some aspect of racism. But Willie had told me that it was something that he had been fighting for most of his life against. And so, it was certainly in the back of his mind, I'm sure. But there were other things that were more important in the front of his mind, and being football and getting good grades and, getting into college. and he had an idea to be a businessman, and he never let anything else, stop him from doing that. If you ask him today what his greatest accomplishments are, he won't really mention football. He'll talk about being a college graduate and being a businessman. Now he loves the fact that he's a Hall of Famer, and a Super Bowl champion. But he knew that when he became a businessman, the football aspect of his life may have opened doors for him, but he was going to have to prove himself in a whole new arena, the business world. And he knew that his background was only going to take him so far. He was going to have to produce on his own with his own diligence.
Talking to Joe Zagorski, the author of America's Trailblazing Middle Linebacker, the story of NFL Hall of Famer Willie Lanier. So you spoke about his college career. What can you say about his time at Morgan State?
Well, he almost never went there. He had accepted a scholarship at a smaller school and then came to the realization that it wasn't for him. The school wasn't for him. I can't remember the name of the school because he didn't really talk too much about it, but he walked on to Morgan State. He took the freshman exam, finished in the top 10% of the class, so he was accepted easily at Morgan State, but there were no football scholarships to be around. So he would do all kinds of odd jobs. He worked in the college cafeteria. He did a lot of different things to try and prove his worth. Eventually, the head coach, Coach Banks, found a scholarship for him that opened up, and once he got it, he was really determined. And Coach Banks realized, hey, I know what kind of a student I have. Now let's see what kind of a football player I have. Turns out he was the greatest football player in Morgan State's history.
No question about that.
Yeah.
So how did he get the nickname Contact? Was it at Morgan State or was it with his time with the Chiefs?
I believe it was more at Morgan State, but it transferred really quickly into the Chiefs, especially in his rookie year. I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. It was towards the end of his career at Morgan State where he got that nickname. But he was a very, very hard hitter, and he would injure a lot of players because he was, we don't see football players doing this too much anymore, leading with their head in making a tackle. With the concussion issues that are around pro football and any level of football today. But after he sustained a concussion himself in his rookie season in the NFL or in the AFL, pro football, at that time with the Chiefs, 1967, he came to a realization that he was not really helping himself by tackling somebody in such a way. He had to pretty much adjust himself. So in the space of less than a year, he went from the nickname Contact to the nickname Honey Bear. From tackling, yeah, he would bear hug people instead of hitting them with his head. He would bear hug them and tackle them that way. Plus, he kind of looks like a honey bear. If you saw photos of him, he's the ultimate size for a middle linebacker in the 60s and 70s. He's not too big, but he's not too small. He has the right weight. I mean, if you're going to make a middle linebacker, he would be the prototype.
No question about that. So why did he wear padding on the outside of his helmet?
Well, it all happened after his concussion.
Okay.
The equipment manager came up with the idea, it may be a while before you learn how to tackle some other way, so let's try this. And Willie was the type of guy that if he was always looking for a better way to do things, and I still think he does today. And so this was something that had not really been tried before, at least not to this degree, where he would have like a padded mohawk on the top of his helmet, going from the rim of his forehead all the way to the back of his neck on the top of his helmet. It looked so unique. it was his trademark, emblem, so to speak. And it really protected his head, but it also protected the players that he would be hitting, because they weren't getting hit as hard with this padding by him. And so it was so unique that it was you could see Willie Lanier from the upper deck of a stadium, and you'd say, "There's Willie Lanier," even if you couldn't see his number on his jersey.
Talking to Joe Zagorski, the author of America's Trailblazing Middle Linebacker, the story of NFL Hall of Famer Willie Lanier. So I have to focus on 1969 now. Can you lay out his regular season for that year?
Well, it was one of a big challenge, and that was not his doing. He played defense, and their starting quarterback, Len Dawson, was injured during the course of the year. That didn't help matters. So the Chiefs had a rookie, Mike Livingston, start at quarterback for, I believe, 7 games that year. Now, the season back in 1969 is only 14 games. So you had a brand-new rookie who was not an All-American coming out of college at Southern Methodist University, coming in to play quarterback for the Chiefs, who were trying to win a division title. And so Willie had to pretty much take it upon himself and his defense to stop the opposition as much as possible and to limit them to as few points as possible, because there was no guarantees that the offense was going to score a whole lot of points. The head coach at the time, Hank Stram, Hall of Famer himself, realized that by 1969, Willie Lanier didn't really need his help anymore. Willie was the captain of the defense. It was understood. He knew what he was doing. He was motivated. He had his idea, his plan in place. He conferred with Coach Stram. They were all on the same page. The defense did extremely well during the 69 season. And every game that Mike Livingston started, they won. It was an incredible feat when you think about it. And I know a lot of credit goes to Livingston, and rightly so, and to the rest of the Chiefs offense. But if it wasn't for the Chiefs defense and Willie Lanier, that might not have happened.
Mike Livingston, the Nick Foles of his time.
You have some pretty good football knowledge background of yourself there, Jacob.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So in the playoffs that year, the Chiefs faced my beloved Jets in the divisional round. Of course, this was after the Jets won their only Super Bowl. So, you know, everyone's thinking that the Jets can come out on top here. Would you be able to describe his play in that game and how he sucked the soul out of the Jets?
Well, it was legendary, and it became his signature game. The Jets were favored to win and go back to the Super Bowl. They were a very good team. They had all their players from the previous year, and they were healthy. The Chiefs, it was a tight defensive game. At that time, their Chiefs starting quarterback, Len Dawson, was back from injury, but it was a defensive game, and it could be that the team that had the ball last might win it. Well, a pass interference play on the Chiefs gives the Jets the ball at the 1-yard line. And Willie Lanier is walking down the field, towards the 1-yard line, and he notices that his teammates are really dejected and figuring, you know what, maybe this isn't to be. And Willie gets a kind of little miffed about that, and so he starts chanting at the 1-yard line, "They're not going to score, they're not going to score." And he starts going louder and louder with this chant, a mantra somewhat, if you will, back and forth along the line of scrimmage. And the rest of the Chiefs players, they had never seen Willie show this kind of emotion before. And he starts screaming these words, "They're not going to score." Well, the Jets started wondering, what the heck's going on? They turn around in the huddle, look around, and they see Willie Lanier yelling, "They're not going to score." Well, they get to the line of scrimmage. First play, Willie Lanier torpedoes into the line, makes a tackle. Gaining, I think there were no yards gained on that play. Second play, same thing, smash right up the middle, same thing. Team tackle, Willie's on top, bringing the Bill Mathis down. At this time, Joe Namath, quarterback of the Jets, is getting a little upset. He's had the ball at the 1 yard line for 2 straight plays, 36 inches from a touchdown that would give his team the lead. Realizes, you know what? Our running game's not getting through this line. I'm going to have to roll out and throw the ball. Willie Lanier is smart enough to realize that's what Joe's thinking. So, and of course, Bobby Bell is too, another Chiefs linebacker. They run after Joe Namath. They know he's going to, fake into the line and make a rollout pass. They cover him almost like a blanket. Joe has nowhere to throw the ball. He throws it into the dirt. 4th down, Chiefs kick a field goal. Now the game's tied, 6-6. Willie comes back to the sideline. The people were going nuts. It was a chance to win the game for the Jets, and Willie's defense stopped them. The game wasn't over yet, and if the Chiefs didn't win this game, then whatever Willie did at that goal line was just going to be an afterthought in history. But the Chiefs did go on to score a touchdown on the following drive, win the game 13-6, move on to the AFL title game against the Raiders. And Joe Namath, I believe that was his final playoff game ever. Yes.
Yeah, not a good memory for us Jet fans.
Sorry, Mr. Namath.
No. So, following that game, the Chiefs went up against the Raiders in the AFL Championship. What can you say about how Lanier did in that game?
Well, it was another defensive struggle. It was tied at 7-7 at halftime, and it seemed to be that luck was going to decide the winner of this one. And the Chiefs, it was a turnover battle. Both teams were committing turnovers left and right, and I have a feeling it was because of the nervousness aspect of that game. Nobody wanted to make a mistake, and when you don't want to make a mistake and you're a little bit timid, that's when you make a mistake. And so everybody was fumbling. Everybody was throwing. I mean, the interceptions were left and right. Oh, gosh. But Willie did pretty well, tipped a ball that was intercepted by the Chiefs. There were several interceptions. Emmett Thomas, cornerback of the Chiefs, intercepted 2 passes, almost 3, came down, landed out of bounds for a third. He had a great game. Jan Stenerud kicked a clinching field goal. There was a little bit of controversy in that game, though. Len Dawson, the Chiefs, deep in his own territory, threw deep downfield for his star wide receiver, Otis Taylor, who juggled the ball along the sideline. The referees said it was a legitimate catch. The Raiders disagreed, obviously. And if you look at the films, he should have been ruled out of bounds. But Willie said, of course he came down in bounds.
Oh, man. Gotta love it.
They win the game 17-7 and move on to Super Bowl IV, the ultimate game for the Chiefs in 1969.
Perfect segue. Can you lay out how he played in that game?
He played excellent. He was so prepared. You see, back at that time, in that year, the NFL and the AFL, they decided there's only going to be 1 week in between the conference title games, the league title games, and the Super Bowl. Now, today you could never do that. There's just so much involved. I wouldn't be surprised if another generation from now it's 3 weeks. But
they want to push the season back into ending right around now, President's Day.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. But anyway, so it's 1 week to prepare for this team. But the Vikings, the Minnesota Vikings, the team that was favored by 13 points to beat the Chiefs, they were a very basic team. And if you looked at the general matchups between the players, especially on the offensive and defensive lines, the Chiefs had them beat by, oh my gosh, maybe 2 inches per man and maybe 20 pounds per man all along the offensive and defensive lines. It was going to be just a matter of time before they wore the Vikings out. And that's what happened. Willie had a great game. He intercepted a pass in the fourth quarter. Stopped one of several Viking drives. In fact, the Chiefs' defense intercepted 3 passes in the fourth quarter. It sealed the deal, 23-7. First world championship ever for the Kansas City Chiefs. Took another 50 years to get another one, but they finally did.
Yeah, this guy named Mahomes.
Isn't he something?
Oh my God, he is the Steph Curry of football. He is going to break the NFL.
Oh well, he's kind of like the guy that's going to be on every single magazine cover coming out for this summer.
No question.
You know, he's just so incredible, and he's able to the muscle movement of his arm to go completely against the grain. And so, you know, throwing a football is not easy.
No.
Throwing it accurate is even harder. And throwing it against the grain of your own body's weight, that's crazy. He's something else.
There is no one who I would rather start a franchise with than Patrick Mahomes. Not Lamar Jackson, not Sam Darnold, not Kyler Murray. Patrick Mahomes.
And you know, Patrick is in the perfect system for the system that
oh, no question. Reed's the perfect coach for him.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because he's an offensive passing type of a guy. And when you got, you know, receivers that can run faster than the wind, you know, just give them a little 10-yard out pass and, you know, 2 seconds later they're standing in the end zone. He's something else. He's going to – I don't want to predict that players are going to go straight to the Hall of Fame because that's not right.
No, it's fair for Mahomes. It's fair. I give you permission to.
Okay, well then there you go. I think he's a future Hall of Famer.
Talking to Joe Zagorski, the author of America's Trailblazing Middle Linebacker, the story of NFL Hall of Famer Willie Lanier. So after Super Bowl IV, he never won another playoff game. What do you think was the seminal reason for the Chiefs' lack of success?
You know, it's something that happened off the field.
Okay.
Back at that time, you know, the NFL draft was competitive because you had the NFL drafting against the AFL teams. And then, you know, back at that time, an AFL team would draft and then an NFL team would draft. Once the league merged in 1970, there was the common draft. You had really only one draft pick per round for the most part, and the players were getting older. The players on the Chiefs team were a veteran team when Willie got there. They got older in 69, and by 70, you know, complacency hits. And I don't care who you are. And I'm going to put this challenge out to the 2020 Chiefs this coming year. There's something in the back of your mind after you win a Super Bowl that for some reason or another, it is so much harder to repeat as world champions. Yes, the Patriots have done it.
No, there's a hangover effect. There's no question.
You know, and so stuff like that it's very challenging. And your opponents know you're the world championship, you know, team. They're going to play harder against you.
Right.
The 71 Chiefs won their division. They went to the playoffs, and they played the Miami Dolphins in the first round of the playoffs.
And the last game at Old Municipal Stadium.
Exactly. And, you know, the Chiefs had a pretty good team. They had a pretty good season in 71. They were getting older, and the Dolphins were young. And they had a dynamic head coach in Don Shula. And I just think that the Chiefs, they made a lot of mistakes in that game. The Dolphins did too, but they were able to recover from them so much easier. And they just showed a poise beyond their years that was really unique and would eventually lead them to 2 world championships the following 2 years, including an undefeated season the following year. So I just kind of think it was stuff that happened off the field that kind of made the Chiefs a little bit weaker and a little less hungry. By 72, their playoff opportunities were nil.
All right, Joe, I'll get you out on this. How dominant was the linebacking core of Lanier, Bobby Bell, and Jim Lynch?
I'd say it was probably one of the top linebacking cores of the 60s and early 70s. I would say probably in the top 3 for sure. Maybe the best.
I can't say I disagree with you.
You got Bobby Bell, who's in the Hall of Fame. Willie's in the Hall of Fame. And Jim Lynch was as solid as an outside linebacker as you could find. And the three of those guys stayed healthy most of their careers. You can't ask for more than that.
No, absolutely not. All right, Joe, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you, Jacob. Take care.
All right, that was Joe Zagorski. His book is America's Trailblazing Middle Linebacker, the story of NFL Hall of Famer Willie Lanier. Hope you enjoyed the interview. I'm coming back with the outro.
Thanks for the plug, Jacob from the past. I appreciate it. Tomorrow, I'll be breaking down some college basketball probably, along with any other sports news that breaks. Until then, I am Jacob Valk saying that I pass the time by reading a book. It's called JFK, The Man and the Airport.